Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia's live broadcast of the start of the 32nd Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race. Today's feed is brought to you by Noakes Boat and Shipyards. We're live from Sydney Harbour today with the start of the race at 1300 hours. From the start, we'll be following the fleet up and out of the heads as they venture onto Southport to be welcomed by our finishing partner on the Gold Coast Southport Yacht Club as part of what is one of Australia's great offshore races. My name is Ross McDonald and I'll be guiding the coverage today with the main commentary coming from Sean Langman and Olivia Price. Sean is a seasoned offshore racer and yachtsman who's completed 26 Rolex Sydney Hobart yacht races and 18 Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast yacht races. From 60-foot racing trimarans to the 9-metre gaff-rigged Maluka of Kermandi, Sean has sailed them all and will give us valuable insight into today's race. Olivia, an Olympic silver medalist in sailing in 2012, brings her own elite-level knowledge of the sport, as well as her knowledge of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, where she has developed through the Youth Sailing Academy and has supported extensively in preparations for today's race. Sean, let's start with you and get a bit of an overview of the race. I guess, as with almost any sailing event, it's a race which is going to be dictated by the conditions, and we've got some challenging conditions this morning.
Well, yeah, thanks, Ross. We've got extremely challenging conditions. Roger Clouds Batten predicted about 10 knots of nor'wester for the start and slowly going to the right as the day came on. At the moment, Olivia and I have just been talking about it and we discussed it. It's probably around about 2 knots at the moment. So it will be dictated by the local little thermal breezes that will come through just before the wind settles into what we're predicting as a reasonable northerly breeze later on this evening.
Olivia, what are your thoughts? I mean, there's going to be some challenges for the guys here getting settled in, but are there opportunities to be gained in these light conditions?
Oh, definitely. You know, the start's going to be pretty important. It's going to be hard to set yourself up well, so you'll see a couple of good boats accelerate from the start, I should say, but you know, with the light conditions it is going to be tricky. It's, you know, 56 boats on the start line. It's going to be a little bit cramped, but it's going to be really exciting to watch for us anyway. And
Sean, with a race of this length, you know, at least a couple of days for the majority of the boats, how much is there to be gained at the start, and is there a lot of importance on it?
There's a lot of importance on the start, really, for the crew morale situation, and when we've got so many TP52s in this race, which are fundamentally almost like a class, even though there is a fair range of IRC rating between Ichiban the highest rating and Species being the lowest rating, they will still want to keep dominance over the other boats, and right from the start. You know, Sydney Harbour, with being such light conditions, is going to be quite tricky to get out of. You could lose easy up to an hour of race time just by clearing Sydney heads.
So what are the guys going to need to be, the guys and girls, going to need to be thinking about today? You know, what at this race start, what are going to be the main priorities?
Well, really the thing is that most of these boats that are competing today, a fair majority of them, have actually raced during winter. We've had a very benign winter in Sydney this year, but the wind conditions are pretty much the same as what we've been experiencing. So we're going to find that most of the crews are going to try and keep their head out of the boat. They're going to be looking out, just looking where the wind shifts are going to come from, and really trying to set themselves up with what we call pressure, which is more wind strength. And we can see that by dark patches on the water. Of course, as well, we've got a tidal effect, and the tide's going to play a reasonable effect, and further to that, we've actually got a reasonable sized ship right in the middle of the harbour.
Yeah, Olivia, that's a bit of an obstruction.
Oh, definitely. It is, you know, it is a little bit off to the side now that the start line's moved a little bit to the east, but it's definitely going to play a part. If there is going to be any wind here this afternoon, it may funnel or it may block some of the start lines, so it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of looking out towards the heads, and you know, you can kind of see a little bit of bobbing around, but otherwise, as you can see, you know, Wild Oats is sitting there not moving around too much, but you know, it is still prep. We do have time for the wind to build, and we'll see how it goes.
Hoping for the best. And I guess, you know, as you say, Wild Oats just sort of sitting there. They've obviously got the mainsail up, but is there anything that they'll be doing just now that they can prepare themselves, or will a lot of the preparatory work be done already?
Look, I think the fantastic thing for the two Supermaxes is that this is their first hit out for some years. The last time that they saw each other, one is Alfa Romeo, which is now called Blackjack, and Wild Oats. The boat which is now Blackjack, that was Alfa Romeo then, it had the upper hand. They beat them in the rolling Sydney Hobart Yacht Race. So fundamentally they're fairly different boats. You know, Wild Oats has had a lot of changes done to their boat, and we know that there's something special about Blackjack too. They've just come out of refit. So it's really important to both those boats just to try and get first blood, and that'll come really on the start line. It's interesting at the moment that I'm actually feeling some wind come on the left side of my face. It's coming out of the west, and all the crews will be getting tuned to that. And even though the start line's been moved, there's a big wind obstruction from where the wind is coming from at the moment, which is this big tanker in the middle of the harbour.
So that's going to play an even bigger role than we anticipated, perhaps. And just talking on these 200-footers, you know, they're sister ships essentially. Is that going to be dramatic? Although you've mentioned that Blackjack's, this is essentially her first day on the water. Probably going to be unfair to compare them.
Well, yeah, as you said, it is Blackjack's first sail today, so it's going to be interesting. You know, Sean and I were discussing just the sail shape and what we think could be an advantage. You know, obviously there's a bit of shaking in to do, and Wild Oats is a seasoned competitor. I think it's going to be a really good show, and as Sean said, the start line's going to mean everything to them. First out of the heads, it's, you know, it is a race in itself, and that's kind of first bragging rights, I guess, in the lead up to the Blue Water point score and all that. It's going to be something that's everyone's going to be really interested in.
With Blackjack's kind of first outing, Sean, what will you be looking at specifically in that boat, and what do you think the crew will be looking at that they can tweak and change and learn from?
Well, it was interesting to Olivia and I when we saw the mainsail get hauled up, that the sail shape, the mast has got quite a bit of what we call pre-bend down low, and we were quite curious how that brand new mainsail was fitting the mast. And whilst we were watching and whilst we were pointing, the guys from I presume from the sail off were already starting to make adjustments to that setup. So there's a lot for them to learn. Starting out in lighter conditions is, dare I say, a good thing for Pete Harburg, the owner, and he's invested a considerable sum on the refit. And, you know, a very long bow strip. We haven't seen them with their Code Zero yet, which I'm sure we're going to see going up the harbour.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've obviously got Maserati here, I believe. Is that a Code Zero that they've got out as well? Is that going to be, you know, the sail of choice?
Definitely, I think today, you know, the conditions look like it's going to be a bit of a reaching as fast as it can be in these light winds. So they're going to want to put up as much sail area as they can to hold enough power. I think majority of the fleet's going to be looking offshore to see where the wind's going to come from. I think that it is going to be about trying to get to that shift first. The first few days is going to be, or day and a half, sorry, is going to be a little bit light. So trying to find that, you know, perfect balance of power and speed versus less sailing distance. I think it's going to be a real balance, and that's something for the navigators to kind of convey to the crew for their sail choice and where they're heading, I guess.
And looking at these conditions over the next couple of days, obviously we'll just be following the boats as they kind of bash up through Sydney Harbour up to the heads. But over the coming days, looking at the weather conditions, what are we thinking? Is this a race which could end up benefiting the smaller boats?
Look, I believe this race is going to be won by the medium-sized boats around the TP52 size. Really, it's going to be a case of a little bit more wind offshore, which Roger Badham has pointed out, but there's more current offshore. So really it's what we call going through the transitions well. And unfortunately for a lot of the crew at night, we've got fairly decent wind tonight. Around about 3 a.m. we're going to see up to 20 knots. But what's going to happen is the wind dies in the early morning and it goes to the west, which it does on the east coast of Australia. When it does that, you really need all the crew down below on the keel bolts, barring 2 or 3 up on deck. And it's those people that put in that level of effort that are going to get through the transition into the next breeze line the next day.
So with those two TP52s, and then obviously we're just looking at Patrice there, the winner of Division A1 in the Winter Series, and that's obviously a KER 46, but around that kind of 46, 52, that sort of size of boat, you think they would say that would potentially be the space to look at?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, Sean, we were both discussing about the Winter Series before, the Land Rover Winter Series that were on Sydney Harbour. I think that that's a good start. What do you think, Sean?
Well, of special interest to me, and a little bit of bias with Patrice. My son Peter Langdon Sully on that one. He said not to mention his name because he didn't want to be embarrassed. But it's a bit of a works team from Noakes Boatyard, the Patrice. We've had her out of the water since the end of the winter point score, and she's had a brand new keel fitted, a rudder change, and a whole new rating. So the ratings come down. I believe the boat's a little bit faster. So if she can nip at the heels of the TP52s, then for sure she's in for a good chance.
So we're just getting a couple of comments and things on our live Facebook page. If you're on YouTube, head over to our Facebook page and leave us a comment, or anything. If you've got any questions for Sean, Ross, or I, we're happy to answer them. We'll be answering them throughout the broadcast. A lot of people, wanting to give support for their yachts of favour, I guess. And we've got 56 entries in the Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race for Robert, who asked how many how many yachts we've got today. So, we're hoping that they all get off the start line nice and cleanly and go straight out their heads to enjoy a lovely sail up the coast.
And then within that, obviously the 10 divisions, including that cruising division. Just to kind of touch back on those TP52s that we were talking about. So there are 8 TP52s in total competing. Is it going to be essentially that mini subcategory you said, those boats within those category? Is it a case of just kind of keeping an eye on them, and essentially if you can come first in the TP52s, you're potentially going to win the race overall?
Well, the thing is, in the TP52s, we're all racing under IRC. And every boat has a rating. So you've got Ichiban, which is the highest rating boat. So essentially she has to beat all the other boats to the finish to beat them on time. So you'll find that Ichiban will be the one that all the other boats will be watching, and also if potentially Ichiban can show them where there's more wind or less wind, they're going to be that close together, these guys. We got the return of Bob Steele and his team on Quest, in the same boat that was called Quest, was called Balance, and that team knows that boat well, very, very, very race hard, and they've been together for a very long time. So it's going to be an exciting division with that many boats. I wouldn't suspect, being as professional as they are, that they'll hold each other up. I think they'll be helping each other along to get a gap on the other boats.
So around 13 minutes from the start. Olivia, in your experience in competition, is this when the nerves start to kick in, or have they kicked in long before this?
Oh, I think there's definitely nerves the day you wake up, the morning of a big race. I think that's probably where it hits me personally the hardest. But everyone's stuck to their routine. They've been through this before, and for any first timers, they've got a lot of experience on board their boats. That's a requirement for our CYCA offshore races. So they have a big amount of experience to lean on and ask questions and feel like they've been through it before when they haven't actually. So I think now is a little bit of waiting around. The light wind, I think, definitely takes its toll. You're just there's a little bit more pressure. You're trying to find the only breeze that there is on the harbour. And that it does have a little bit of pressure, but everyone, as I said, everyone's been through it before, and good luck to them.
Is that the same on your boats usually, Sean? Are you, is it usually a relaxed atmosphere, or is it, final checks, ticking off the last few things?
Look, I think the thing, regardless of what level you are at the sport, there's always a level of excitement. And we do this sport because we love sailing, and that excitement you've got to try and keep down a little bit and just stay professional and do your job well. As Olivia said, it's very patchy conditions, so those that can stay focused could potentially get the jump in the first hour of this race, which will set them up for an overall win. So there's a level of angst, if you like, anxiety, just making sure that the final checks are done, staying professional, and making sure that obviously you don't break the start. In this race last year, there was a fair pile up at the start, which actually put a few boats out. So that's the thing, to finish first you must finish. So you've got to get off the start clean and get out ahead.
If you're coming up to this start line, Olivia, what is there a position that you would say is, preferable?
Well, we just heard the sound from offshore for the 10-minute gun. So they've got 10 minutes to go to the race, and it's a perfect time to look across the course. In the middle of the harbour, I'm seeing a little bit of breeze, and you'll see on your screen that a bunch of boats are just starting to figure out, what sail are they going to put up, where are they going to have their crew weight, what side of the start line they're going to start. If it was me, I would probably start towards the middle end of the line, like the middle of the line. Our big ship, the Reliance, is, I think, going to be a little bit of a problem for the pin end boats. So I would want to stay away from that.
Are we going to potentially see more boats bunching then towards the other end?
It's going to be interesting. I think that's really the only word I can use for it, because it is going to be a crammed start, and that's what we've got with 56 boats on the start line. And I think I'm just hoping that there's no argy-bargy and everyone sticks to the rules.
Absolutely. Well, yep, that's it. We'll hopefully profanities will be kept an absolute minimum, and we can enjoy a very exciting. I mean, let's be honest, it's a beautiful day for a race. Although the wind conditions aren't absolutely ideal, it's nice and clear, and nice bit of sparkle on the blue water with all these boats ready to compete. Interesting within that, sort of larger boat category, obviously talking to the guys from Tribal Warrior earlier today, Tribal Warrior 2, so they're going to be the first Indigenous crew. They obviously competed, they were hoping to compete to go down to Hobart last year, but weren't able to do so, just with difficulties with their boat. But great to see them back and competing in what will be the first Indigenous crew up to the Gold Coast.
Ross, we've just had a couple of questions on Facebook.
Yep.
For Jane, who is asking about the old Cougar 2 from Tasmania. Yeah, they are renamed and racing in this year's Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race. It's actually called 5200, and it's, the TP52 is owned by Michael Spies, and I think, as Sean said before, he's got the lowest rating of the 8 TP52s in this race, so he's going to be really interesting to watch. Going up the coast, the Battle of the TPs is obviously one that everyone watches, so he's going to be a bit of a threat, I think. So, thanks, Jane, for your question.
Yeah, Sean, you'll know Michael Spies pretty well. He's a seasoned campaigner.
Oh, look, Speezy will squeeze the last pip, I was going to say, out of that lemon, but it's not the nice thing to say about the lowest rating TP52, but he'll definitely get the most he can out of his yacht. He's one of the best seamen that you would ever go to sea with. He won't have to bring in any of those type of skills for this race, because it's going to be a very light air race. But for sure, Michael Spies is going to give it everything. I'm just looking at the breeze around the harbour now. We had a slight increase of wind that came just out of Bradley's Head about 20 minutes ago, which has now gone completely and just gone into a complete hole. The smoke off our big ship here is just starting to filter out of the northwest, and looking up towards the heads, a couple of cruising boats sailing there, and dare I say, there's one little cruising boat up there that's probably doing twice the speed of what Wild Oats is doing potentially at the moment. So slowly but surely, I believe Roger Clouds-Batten's weather forecast is filtering down the harbour.
Well, that's exciting.
No, it's interesting as well. I've kind of watched there's a bit of a haze over Sydney at the moment, the city, and I think that it has actually moved with that breeze direction from the northwest. So that could be a good sign that the haze is starting to clear away from our Sydney Harbour racecourse, and it might open up a little bit more of an opportunity throughout the afternoon.
With that counting down, we must be fairly close to that 5-minute gun, but all the boats obviously starting to take up more of a position. Is there any benefit here to having all your sails up? Is that just purely a strategic decision? Is it something that you would take a last-minute punt on, Sean?
Well, the thing is, at the moment, as far as the tide effect goes, that's the big thing. Like Olivia's favourite part of the start is right in the middle of the harbour, which has got the most tidal flow. So really got to watch out that you still maintain steerage, and you're obviously not over the start line early. The boats that are milling around at the moment, I would say probably 90% leading up to the 5-minute gun are still with their engines engaged, just finding themselves the preferred spot to start in the middle of the harbour. And the very large boats, we just had the 5-minute sound then. The two very large boats are starting to play cat and mouse now. Super Maxis. Both have got their biggest stem-headed code zeros attached, which means that they're looking at not actually going hard on the wind, but just what we call reaching, where the wind is coming across the boat a little.
Yeah, you can see on your screen that Wild Oats has just unfurled that. So they're obviously getting really set up and ready to take on the start.
You were commenting earlier, Sean, about that mainsail on Wild Oats. It's a thing to behold, but just the shape of it, very rectangular.
Yes, well, we've seen the square top as one of my nearest, closest mates, who's 92 years of age, who loves gaff rig boats. He says that everyone's sailing around in gaff riggers these days because we've got these top battens that are almost like an old-fashioned gaff. But because of carbon fibre and the new modern materials, we can support these sail shapes now. I just said earlier that Wild Oats has gone from a stem-headed code zero, so that means it comes off the bow of the boat and not the bowsprit. But I just noted on Blackjack, they're just unfurling now, that they've gone for a code zero that goes all the way to the end of the bowsprit, and it actually is higher in the clews. So it's actually probably a little bit more forgiving shape, and at the moment, as far as the sail plans go, I'd favour the Blackjack.
Interesting. And does that, they don't have quite the same sail area on that code zero, or because it goes out on the top of the bowsprit they have more?
Well, looking at the mid-girth right in the centre of the sail, they look very similar. Wild Oats sail comes a long way back of the boat and is very, very low on the clew. The corner of the sail where the sheet attaches to is almost touching the deck, whereas if you look at Blackjack coming into view shortly, it's actually raised up above the shears. So even though it doesn't get what we call end plate, where the actual sail's touching the deck, which closes and seals the airflow, I think it's going to be an easier sail to adjust. It just looks a bit cleaner to me.
Well, it must be just a couple of minutes from the start now. It almost feels like that wind's died even more, dare I say it, exactly where we are, although is there still maybe some breeze further up the harbour?
I don't know, Ross. There seems to be a spectator in the middle of the harbour, and his backstay flag is just fluttering a little bit more than it would be around here. So I'm excited for that to possibly come down to the start, or even if we have to wait for it a little bit, for everyone to kind of get up into that area. It's definitely looking a little bit nicer up the harbour than it is where we are right now, but that's only a good thing.
I do believe, looking at our big ship here with that little bit of smoke funneling off the back of it, that breeze that Olivia's just pointed out is coming. What's curious to me is we got Wild Oats on port tack with no rights at the moment, skirting along the line. We've got Blackjack on starboard tack, heading exactly the opposite direction, but with no problem. Actually, sorry, I'm facing back to front. Wild Oats on starboard and Blackjack's on port. So there's quite a few boats that have elected to split and go for what they see as the wind at the pin, whereas Wild Oats is feeling that they can do what we call a late jibe and then try and pick up this new breeze that's coming down.
What would be your thoughts on these boats just up towards the pin end? Are they starting to bunch a little bit? Are they potentially trapping themselves a little bit up towards the line? Is it going to be very tight?
Well, my feeling with the boats at the pin is that they've got a lot of room to manoeuvre because their sails are fairly eased. The wind at the moment is fairly soft. We're down to 1 minute to go now. Fairly soft coming out of the southeast. There's just a tiny little puff coming out of the back of Shark Island, which Wild Oats is now accelerating away on. Blackjack is responding to that. She's just jibed over. They use the cannon keel to drop the sails over more easily, and she'll sharpen up her angle now and try and close that gauge between her and Wild Oats.
Hey Sean, I'm interested in the conflict between these two potential light breezes. So the southeast that you were just describing, and then the north-northwest that seems to be up the harbour. What do you think's going to win? Because it's kind of got to go into your setup, right? So everyone's got their big sail area out, but if this comes a little bit more on the nose or into the breeze, it's going to kind of throw a curveball into their game plan, right?
Yeah, I believe so, and I'm really liking what Blackjack's doing because We've
Was
just
that the
had
gun?
the start gun.
We're off.
There's
And
the
even
cannon.
though Wild Oats definitely has got the jump at the start, where the new breeze is coming from up the harbour, I do believe that Blackjack's setting herself up in the better position because we don't have a forecast of a sou'easter, even though it does happen in winter. We have
Yes.
a forecast that it is going to go around to the north. There is enough sou'easter at the moment that we've actually got yachts with spinnakers up,
Yeah.
which was not in the forecast. A lot of the boats this morning were actually taking spinnakers off and putting them away in the car. I think they're regretting it right now.
Are you surprised at all with the variety? I mean, it almost feels like there's not necessarily a standard operating procedure and everyone's trying some different tactics in order to try and get a bit of an edge.
Definitely, everyone wants to just get out of this convergence zone of the start line. So it is where everyone spends the most time next to other boats. That you won't really see many other boats for quite a while after you get out of Sydney Harbour. So they definitely just want to get out of here as quickly as possible. And you know, sometimes that calls for desperate measures. You know, spinnaker up when we weren't expecting it. It adds to the excitement for us. So Jeff Dusting's just commented that he's at Watson's Bay and 6 knots from 310 to 320 degrees. So not bad, not bad.
So yeah, I guess once we get up and round out up towards Watson's Bay, perhaps there'll be a little bit more. If you're in one of these boats, Sean, potentially, would you look at changing your tactics if you're not, you know, maybe you've decided to go with a different sail setup? Would you consider putting your spinnaker up if it, you know, are the conditions starting to call for that?
Well, I like the boats that have actually gone with code zeros rather than spinnakers. The smaller boats, which have got less boat speed, they don't drag the apparent wind forward. So, you know, the bigger boats couldn't use a spinnaker at the moment. They'd find that the sail would just collapse. But what we're finding is, I was just watching Olivia's puff, as I'm going to call it, coming down the harbour. And, you know, Watson's Bay pub would be a great place to be sitting at the moment having a gin and tonic. But just watching this breeze filtering down now, there was a really big hole that appeared. But now Olivia's puff is really filling in. Like, the left-hand side of the harbour is looking really nice now.
Yeah, definitely. As we've just seen Wild Oats, they've just furled that code zero, and I think they're kind of trying to figure out what is going to happen with this. I think they're prepared for possibly a jibe over, or a jibe in their breeze, but kind of an attack in this one. And I think they're just trying to make a decision and enforce some sort of movement in the boat. They seem to be pretty stop dead in the water.
It looks like no one's really been able, although that said, Blackjack potentially maybe the shout in terms of the position that they've been able to get themselves up into.
Yeah, I'm really liking what Blackjack's doing. They're sending someone up the mast now just to look up the harbour to see what the wind is doing. It's a tactic that we used to see a lot in the America's Cup. Now with the wing sails, that's not possible, and the different format of racing. But right from the start, I really like how Peter Harburg's team set themselves up. They're going to start to think about a jib, though. You know, like they're starting to walk towards the foredeck. They're starting to think about hanging on a working sail, because they may have to furl this very shortly and tack over from starboard onto port tack, with Olivia's puff just trying to get its way.
It's
down the
definitely
harbour.
almost an auto tack for them if they're going to hit this breeze. You can see the code zero just laughing a little bit, and it's going to kind of happen any minute now. There's still boats up next to them with spinnakers, so who knows at this moment.
Yeah, welcome to winter.
Yeah, it does seem to be. Does it seem like the boats up the pin end have potentially got a little bit of an edge over those who were further down, with the exception of Oates?
Well, the thing that we talked about earlier, you know, we've been focusing on the larger boats. The smaller boats, like at the moment, the smallest boat in the fleet, Komatsu Azura, is actually winning on time because she's so close to the maxi. She's only a few boat lengths behind. And now we've got, in the TP52 battle, we've got the Ichiban leading that mob with a lower setup of code zero. Like, her setup goes from the hounds. It doesn't go right to the top of the mast. So it's a crossover sail that they can actually go upwind with. So Matt Allen's been pretty clever here. He's just hedged his bets, been patient, and as we say, he's out of here.
It's definitely those pin end boats that are dominating at the moment. They seem to be in a little bit more breeze. As we've kind of moved up the course, we can feel almost 6, 8, maybe even topping 8.5 knots here. It's kind of coming from the west, west-northwest, a little bit further left than we originally thought. But then again, these boats behind us are still with spinnakers. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here.
So we've got Wild.
Oh, Oates is off and running.
Now been able to get into Olivia's puffins out of here. Let's just see. So they were very patient, setting themselves up. As Olivia said, they furled, they jibed over, got themselves into the position they wanted to get into, and they are away. Pete Harburg's Blackjack's on the same line, but pretty much left behind now.
I'm watching Concubine at the moment, and they've just jibed over. They're just to windward of Blackjack at the moment. I think that they've done really well out of this start. They've just jibed over, as I said, and they're underneath the puff, so they're going to be in it the longest. I'm interested to see how that plays out. Everyone else behind seems to be almost auto jibing and tacking. It's interesting, and let's see how they keep going up the harbour. There's going to be a lot of jostling for positions and trying to get out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so what we've noted now is that Wild Oats was definitely into that line that Olivia spoke about. Yeah, there now, if you can see their mainsail, it's completely backwinding because there's really powerful stem-headed code 0 that I was talking about earlier is just pushing all the wind flow over that mainsail, and it's the right sail for the conditions. They're laying the mandatory red marker that they have to go round at South Head. They have to go and take that to starboard, so on their right hand side of the boat, and then they can bear away and probably stay pretty much with the same sail and head straight up the coast.
How much of a frustration do you think it'll be for those other boats to see Oates kind of just soak that up and disappear? They've opened up a fair gap, although I believe we've got Blackjack approaching us fairly rapidly from behind. But yeah, will it be a frustration for the other boats that Oates has been able to pick that up so well and take it?
Well, I think to be fair and to be frank about Wild Oats, they're an incredibly experienced team. And they have been patient. They knew where they wanted to be for Olivia's puff. They got themselves there, they waited, they actually sat still for a minute, redeployed and went. I actually liked what Blackjack were doing. I saw that as what I would do in the conditions, bearing in mind that they're the ones that are trying to have the big initial hit out against the well-proven Wild Oats.
Yep.
Yeah, we're just taking a look back now at the rest of the fleet with our drone, and it's still big tussles. I know that Tribal Warrior 2, Maserati, RKO, a bunch of the TP52s actually did get left behind a little bit there. So they're going to try and do as best as they can to catch up. We've got Ichiban on the wind in the middle of the harbour making big gains, and I think the others are going to be a little bit jealous that they missed out on that opportunity.
Yeah, you highlighted Concubine there, Olivia, and the fact that they were in a really good position and able to capitalise, and they really have actually. They're really pushing up. Essentially they'd be in third or fourth spot.
It's definitely a big difference to their last year's start, where they were caught up in a bunch of boats and had to retire early. So they're sitting in fourth out of the start here. I think that they will be absolutely stoked. They're from South Australia and made the trip up here to start off the Blue Water point score season, and I know that they're going to be really happy with that. They've just filled up their code 0. They're sitting on the rail and ready to lock in for what looks like a really beautiful breeze here now.
It's just a gorgeous breeze now, and when you look at Concubine, a little bit shorter than the TP52, she's one of those ones that we said that could hang on to the TP52s and do very well. And everyone getting on the rail, they'll probably think about getting rid of this Code Zero because there's a bit of windage hanging out the front of the boat. They'll probably think about that shortly. But at the moment, everyone's just playing it cool. This little puff that Olivia talked about has seen wild oats go over the horizon pretty much, and everyone in pursuit.
There they go, Sean. As you said, they are dropping that Code Zero. It is windage for them. They're just sending their bowman up the front. Luckily, there's not swell at the moment because I have a feeling he's a little bit underdressed for getting wet.
Yeah. Oh, the thing is here, like these guys always like to pull down the zero on the windward side. The helmsman will be getting frustrated now, just going, just get it down. It doesn't have to come on the windward side. But yeah, can and kill boat, you can just make it happen because you can just change the weight. But these guys are just struggling with this zero now. And as Olivia said, we've got a guy in winter sailing with shorts. You've got to love Sydney in winter.
It is a beautiful place to be. And you know what? We've got so many spectator boats out here watching as well. You know, everyone's just want to get a part of the action. Behind us, there's a fair few yachts still in that no wind section. So it's going to take a little bit of time for them to catch up to us and get into this, you know, what is a now 8-9 knot beautiful northwesterly breeze. Everyone's kind of getting there. There's a lot down on the eastern shore near Nielsen Park of Sydney Harbour. And I think they're all kind of going to be taking each other's wind and causing a bit of trouble. But we'll see how it pans out.
So this is up just coming up on Koa.
Koa, yeah. So this is a TP52 that has been, you know, it's been around for a little bit of time now. So that's Andy Kiernan and Peter Wrigley. They are avid sailors. They compete in the Land Rover Winter Series. They've done a few Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast yacht races, and you know, they've had a bit of unlucky fortune in the Rolex Sydney Hobarts, but it looks like they're getting off to a glamour start here in Sydney Harbour.
Yeah, I've got to say, I really like the setup here on Koa. Only got one guy to leeward, guys well stacked up on the rail. Yeah, we've got Steve McConaughey there, well-known tactician on these types of boats. He'd be pretty comfortable the way they've got out of here. Lost touch a little bit with Ichiban, but they'll work hard through the night to bring in that gap. We've got the navigator in front there. Navigator on the rail these days, they don't sit down below. Navigator's sitting there just looking at his tough book, probably looking at the weather stations up the coast. Very important navigation in this race to get all the weather stations, try and link them together. You see how he's now pointing his hand and he's explaining to the crew what he believes is going to happen next.
It definitely is going to be a navigator's race, this one, Sean, because, you know, the breeze is looking a little bit shaky further up the coast for the evening. As you said, there will be some later tonight, but this first initial getting out of the harbour and sending it offshore, there could be still a lot of patchiness in the breeze.
Yeah, and that's for sure. It's almost sometimes that, you know, leading is not necessarily the best thing, because you can actually
always make mistakes.
Lead into a hole and the other boats sail around you.
Yeah, just looking at the boats around about us as well. Maserati are starting to pick up. There's still a fairly substantial bunch back down towards the start line who obviously weren't able to pick up this breeze, or perhaps it didn't make itself very apparent. Is that going to be a frustration for them, do you think, Olivia? I mean, obviously it's not the ideal start, but you know, it's a long race and there's divisions to fight for.
Definitely, because there is such a big bunch still down here at the bottom of Sydney Harbour, it is still an open game. A lot of yachts would be looking around and just sussing out who they're with and what advantage they can each kind of get from each other. We can definitely see that even some people are on starboard tack, so they've had to tack because they haven't made that point of out of Rose Bay. So, you know, actually quite a lot of the fleet has started to tack over, so it's opening up even more opportunity to kind of make advantages and take gains.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, Olivia, that initially I wasn't on the same page as you. I was starting mid-line. I wanted to start up on the high end of the line where Ichiban started. We ended up with Ichiban on the pin end on port tack, and it's laid beautifully down the centre of the harbour. But then we had Wild Oats that ended up all the way down the boat end and is laid up through the harbour, whereas these smaller boats have had to tack backwards and forwards with a big wind shift. So it's all gone in favour of the front runners with that Olivia Puff that came down the harbour.
Yeah, definitely. I think what my thought was there is that if the breeze is going to come, that's where it's going to be from that northwest. So if it was going to stick to that forecast, that was kind of the best place to get it. And as we saw, Ichiban was the only one to make it out of that pin. And the rest are all stuck here battling away. So we've got UBS Wild Thing, Reeve, we've got RKO, we've got Quest. Everyone's kind of trying to jostle for position to get out of the harbour.
I think of note now too is the ship is actually facing straight up and down the harbour, like north-south now, which means that there has been enough wind effect to turn that ship around. So we've pretty much settled into the conditions that Roger Batten said was going to happen. By race start, he expected that it was going to be northwest, around about 10 knots of wind, which is ideal. We've still got some boats with code zeros in the air, which does surprise me a little bit. A couple of TP52s back here again.
Yeah, we've got Frantic just trying to put their nose out the front of the pack here. Snowdome Occasional Course Language 2 is one of those ones that Sean was explaining. He's still got his code 0 up. I think that they'll be sending the bowman forward pretty quickly and bringing that down, because this is going to be an important part of the race. Just trying to get clear wind and get out of this harbour. We got Patrice to windward, and they're kind of sitting in some beautiful breeze. So you happy about that, Sean?
Yeah, I'm really happy for Pete, my son, because he is in front of Occasional Course Language. Interesting point with Occasional Course Language, most of the crew have come off the Midnight Rambler. Ed Salter's well-known yachty have joined Warwick Sherman and his team, and they're really campaigning towards the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race, using this as a hit out. They do need to get that code 0 out of the air, and probably Warwick Sherman needs to get up to windward. And it is not the smallest man on the boat. Come on, Wazza, up here, mate.
Who do you fancy in this line at the moment? We've obviously got a good few boats kind of, in the middle of the harbour, and then more kind of closer to the shore on the south side. Yeah. What do you think the line is at the moment?
Well, I think it's a train now. Like Patrice will be really disappointed how they got off the start, but the Cyrene, fundamentally a cruising boat is in front of them, so they've got to keep their air clear. They've got to keep themselves so that they're not getting the backwash, the windage off the boat in front of them. So they'll be working pretty hard at that. The thing is, if you have a disappointing start, you've just got to knuckle down. It's a long race. Your opportunity will come back, and you've just got to stay focused and just keep chipping back onto the green, as we say.
As the boats head up to the harbour, is it going to be, what we expected to see from the weather, we didn't quite see. It was a little bit suspect, and there was some wind to be found. As we get kind of further up into the harbour, is it going to be a case of getting up there and then seeing what the conditions are like and then acting accordingly, or do you think there are some preparations that these guys can do just now to get ready for what's further up?
Well, what we saw on Koa, with the navigator sitting up there with his tough book, he's like an iPad, he's looking at the weather observations up the coast, which is pure, it's legal to do. So by doing that, they'll start to talk about where they need to be set up. The frustration when you got quicker boats like like the boat we're following now, like the Patrice, is that they're struggling to get through the pack and stay on top of the boats that are slowing them up potentially.
Definitely. So Patrice has got Scamp to leeward, which is a Beneteau First 45. Obviously, we're not used to seeing these two boats right next to each other. the only thing that we can kind of do is just hope that everyone goes for speed here. As a sailor, the fastest out of the harbour is definitely going to be an advantage to everyone. So if anyone's trying to hold you up or battle that position, all you want them to do is just accelerate and just get out of here as soon as possible.
Yeah, so the tough thing we're seeing now with these windward boats in the train, as I called it, they've actually got less pressure, which is a little unusual, but it is synonymous with Sydney Harbour in winter.
Sydney Harbour winter.
The boats that are down towards Watson's Bay near the Wedding Cake have got a lot more pressure. They've got a lot more wind and they're just scooting through, whereas the Scamp that we spoke about, the Cyrene, and now the Patrice are just falling off this nice little bit of pressure that we saw earlier.
Got a good little bunch over here with Smuggler, Daredevil by the looks of it. They've obviously they've kind of come up quite a bit. Obviously they have to, as they're gonna hit the beach. But they're coming back up into the centre a little bit more, so we're probably going to see a bit of a convergence of your trains, Sean.
Well, that's for sure. They've all got to get round. They've all got to get round this marker, this red channel marker that depicts the reef off South Head, South Reef. So that is a mark of the course. It's the start, the South Reef mark, and then finish up at Southport. So we're seeing this wind actually going quite aggressively to the right now, other than the few boats that are closer to Watson's Bay. So it's a big wind shift happening now, and we're going to see quite a bit of tacking now for the back markers. It's not really the best day to be at the back.
Right.
No, definitely not. We can see that a lot of boats are hard on the wind now, and if we're looking a little bit closer, we can see these boats off Camp Cove. So Daredevil and a couple of others. We've got Reeve down there. They're really, really light. So what they did just burst along the leeward side of Sean's train, they're now kind of even moving to leeward. So Sibby is our only female skipper in this Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast yacht race on Daredevil. She's now sitting to leeward because there is really light wind. So it's really interesting. It's so patchy. It's so puffy. It really is. It's hard out here. It really is hard.
How much does luck play into that?
It is. You do have to be lucky, but you also have to be good. So it is about where you position and kind of reading it. But then on Sydney Harbour in winter, anything can happen, and that's what we're seeing right now.
You've really got to understand that there's going to be swings and roundabouts, and keep to your formula. You've already worked out where the breeze is going to come from. If you get yourself a little caught out, you just got to work your way to that preferred side of the harbour. We're now seeing the Daredevil's actually got some left-hand air, so she's lifting now. So she did the right thing by not panicking and not tacking, but just holding on and waiting for the next puff. But then we see the boats that were falling off the train to the left now have really picked up. So as Olivia said, yes, you can be a little lucky, but you've also got to be good. So don't panic.
As they say, the better you are, sometimes the luckier you are.
Definitely pays in sailing. I think that's a good saying, Ross.
I think we've got a couple of boats obviously starting to tack, as you said. I mean, obviously they're getting pretty close to the shore, so having to move in a bit. But this is obviously going to be, are we potentially going to see a few not close encounters, but not far off it?
Yeah, we're going to see a close cross here between the Reeve and the Daredevil. What's nice, they're actually waving them through here, which is a nice gesture. The thing that's so great about ocean racing is that even though it might seem between the Blackjack and the Wild Oats and the smaller boats at the back of the fleet, it might seem that there's a large disparity of the types of boat, but they're all racing under a formula that equalises them. So even though the big boats have got away, these boats are still actually racing them by the clock. So you've got to keep working at it, and you'll pick somebody and you'll go, that's the boat that I believe that I can beat through the water, and there will be a race within a race, which even though it's light winds, there's still a level of excitement now that the boats are starting to tack up the harbour.
So it's all about the overall winner. And yeah, just I guess that levels the playing field quite substantially. And you know, if everyone sails to the potential, whether it be a big boat or a small boat, anyone can win it on their day. As you were saying earlier, Komatsu Azuro, one of the smallest boats in the fleet, has a very good chance with the conditions that are expected over the next few days.
Yeah, with the Komatsu Azuro, they'll be really keen on the front boat slowing up and the southerly coming through on. It's forecast for Tuesday, but if it comes earlier, they will shunt up to the front of the fleet more. And you know, I've sailed Super Maxis and I've sailed in the smallest boats, and you find that ocean racing's like that. You'll get your day, but you can't just depend on what the weather forecast is. You've just got to keep working at it the whole time, and it really, the rewards are there for those that just keep consistent, keep chipping away, just keep doing the work.
As you can see on your screen, we've just been following Sibby on Daredevil, and she seems to be lifting now in a right-hand shift on starboard tack. So she's actually caught up from where she was, you know, just a few moments ago. You can see that, you know, the crew's thinking really hard. Sibby's having a look around, seeing if there's anyone going to get in her way. And I think she's actually off to a really good start.
I think what she's done here was good, that she was patient. Now, took that little right-hand shift and just kept going into the corner till she got the most pressure. She's starting to now drop off it a bit and go left, almost on the ley line. I think pretty soon I'd be thinking about it, Sibby.
So we've got just past Frantic there, who are obviously heading towards that marker, and I guess they're going to have to consider that. If you know, if that's one of the trains, are they pointing high enough to actually get around that?
Yeah, so just looking out of the harbour now, that right-hand shift that Sibby was just in seems to be establishing itself a little bit further out. So we've got vanishing point here on port, and they're just knocking a little bit. Patrice is just to windward and have had to duck Chancellor, so it is still really close here. So they were against the shift. Although Patrice is a faster boat, they did have to give way because they were on port tack. To leeward of them is Pretty Woman, who seems to be doing quite well. They were in some clear breeze, although Patrice, because they did have to duck that boat, they accelerated so quickly that I think they're just going to roll them to windward.
What's the guys on vanishing point would be so happy with themselves that they're right up in the mix here, which is essentially a cruising boat, and they're right up in the mix, and against some fairly slick race boats that have put considerable fortunes into doing well. So it is a bit of a leveler today on Sydney Harbour, that's for sure, with these weather conditions.
How much of an impact will that have long term? I mean, impossible to say, I know for sure, but could that could potentially change within the course of a few hours, or more likely to be a few days?
Well, the nice thing about these large, heavier displacement boats is once they get clear air, once they get out to sea, they can sail one tack and stretch their legs a bit. I think what would concern me mostly in this race is that, as Olivia pointed out, we've just had an established big right-hand shift, and people are going to want to try and get up the coast. If they stick in that right-hand shift too long, they'll end up in quite a considerable amount of current.
Yeah, definitely. I was just watching behind us a little bit. You know how we were talking about Sibby, she was almost on ley line with that left-hand shift. Well, unfortunately, she had to do another 2 tacks. She just underlaid that red channel marker. Although she's recovered so well, she's still bow ahead of the boats around her. So she'll be a little bit upset about that, but she's clawed her way back, and good crew work with the good 2 tacks, and now she's ready to go.
Yeah, look, and the thing to mention with the Daredevil team, they've had bad luck in the last 2 starts of the Rolex Sydney Hobart race, breaking rudders in both of those. Their first hit out since getting a new rudder and quite a bit of rigging work done recently. So, it's great to see that, they're just a leeward of a fairly fast 60-footer in the Triton.
Yeah, Triton might be a little bit a little bit not stressed, but I think that they were hoping for a little bit more of a better start. You know, as you said, 60-footer. I think they would have expected to be a little bit further up the race course. But again, as we've described all afternoon, this is Sydney Harbour in winter. Anything happens. So they are going to roll Daredevil here, but they'll be wanting to just claw back as much as they can on this fleet.
With this 60-footer here, Sean, obviously they're competing in the Division 0 against the likes of Blackjack, Maserati and Wild Oats, and those 3 boats are pretty much long gone in terms of that. And you mentioned the morale that could potentially damage to an extent, but it's a long race. Will these guys just stay busy about their work and you know, just focus on one thing at a time?
Yeah, the big relief is when the breeze settles in and you can start going forward and start passing boats, and you know that's what they're doing now. They're moving forward. You know, they're pretty close to South Reefy, I must say.
Yeah.
As is Civi. But yeah, they'll start to stretch their legs now and start going past boats, which will be a big morale boost for them.
With this, are they potentially going to have to tack? Are they going to be able to go out the harbour here and head up, or they're going to have to tack when they get further out? I think right up in the distance there I can see Oats, and it looks like Blackjack's stuck in a tack, you know, actually out past the heads.
Yeah, well, we're looking a long way up the racetrack. We do see both on port tack, and at the moment we're seeing the Blackjack's a little more upright, but I would say that's just a little less wind. Clouds was predicting more wind as you went offshore. Also to be careful about that current.
As you say, yeah, that current. So how big an impact is that going to have? Really, is that going to really, you know, dictate how the boats behave over the next few hours?
Well, the thing is, in this race, you know, it's we're not got like Finding Nemo EAC dude. It's not going to be that strong because it doesn't flow that strong in winter, and you know, and clouds are saying, you know, up to possibly a knot of current. So wind is going to be the more discernible factor. But certainly when you get up around Smoky Cape, there will be quite a bit of flow. So it's really about setting yourself up with the current and still working what wind that you do have.
Yeah, as we just work our way kind of back down towards the rest of the fleet, it almost seems to be, you know, the big boats managed to get off. There was 2 or 3 at the front, or 3 or 4 at the front, and then we had a big batch, and there's been a, you know, that fairly substantial division between the rest, who are following up behind.
Yeah, definitely. What we're looking at in a minute is the GOAT. So the Sydney 38, owned by the GOAT Syndicate, as they like to call themselves. It's, you know, they're looking really good at the moment. They're in a good amount of breeze, and they're to windward of everyone, so they kind of miss the convergence zone around that red channel marker.
Yeah, so this team, of the Sydney 38, the GOAT, have been together for quite a long time. Now, they actually represented the Cruising Yacht Club. They actually represented the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia in Newport Ride Island, and were the top Australian team. So they know each other really well. They've been campaigning this boat for a long time. They'd be really happy. Mitch on the helm there, they'd be really happy with their position at the moment. And they'd actually be quite surprised that they've got a left-hand shift that we never saw. Olivia and I missed that one.
No.
There's really great left-hand pressure out here. And they're, for a little 38-footer, they're now challenging some of the 50-footers, 52-footers to leeward of them. So they'd be extremely happy with how they're going right now.
Yeah, they're definitely making gains. Down to leeward, we've got a couple of boats. So we've got St Jude, which is Noel Cornish's boat. So he's been campaigning for quite a while. He is an avid YSA supporter and is on the board of the CYCA. He's loving being out here. He came in this morning to have a chat and just can't wait to get up the coast. He's always one just to get out there and give it all he's got.
Yeah, what I really like about this owner and this boat and this campaign is that he clearly loves his sailing and clearly loves this yacht. He's invested in a brand new mast and brand new keel on this boat with new sails, and she had one of the early hit outs in the winter point score about a month back, and you could tell by the jubilation of the crew each week how much they're loving their sailing. Big smiles on their face. She's built in Australia, a Sydney 47. Is let's say a smaller sister to the boat that we just saw, that we're just talking about, the Goat. Looking really fine now, really well trimmed. You can see the helms and the way he's holding his shoulders, that he's locking himself in, feeling those little left-hand shifts as they're coming across, and dare I say, he'd have a big smile on his face right now. Someone needs to find that lured sheet that's trailing to down on the side. They wouldn't be too happy about that.
Well, they seem to have come from nowhere in a way. They were obviously quite close to Reeve, who's about maybe 70, 80 metres behind, but St Jude weren't really in the mix, and obviously have found themselves a nice pocket.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we said earlier. It's about there is luck, but you've got to be good, you've got to be patient, you've got to back yourself. We just got the owner having a little look around now, so he is pretty comfortable having a little look at his opposition. So, he'd be mindful of who he wants to be in front of, and he just little turn around. He's having another little turn around. I think he's turning around probably a bit much now, but he's having a little bit of a smile, so he's happy with where he's placed himself. Still this massive left-hand shift on the water. I don't know where the Goat's heading. She's going, I think she's going to Manly to get a coffee.
Yeah, they are very high up there, Sean. So, they're going to have to, at some point, crack some sheets and get around North Head without getting too caught up in the light breeze wind shadow under there. So, we'll be watching.
That's it. We're starting to see the remainder of the fleet coming up now. Got Smuggler, who managed to find a bit of pace.
So Smuggler, for those who don't know, is the Rogers 46, previously called the Goat 2. So they've renamed their boat Smuggler, and they're ready to go. They are loving just being renaming their boat. I think, they're ready to go.
What's your thoughts on that, Sean?
Yeah.
Around renaming boats, traditionally something that's a bit bad luck, but now just so common.
Well, the thing is, if a sponsor's going to give you some money, you're more than happy to rename your boat. But, yeah, look, it was a tradition. It was a bit like starting a voyage on a Friday, having a black boat, or having bananas on board. Lydia's Olympic silver medalist, and I'm sure she ate lots of bananas to get that medal. If she had a few more, she probably would have got the gold. But, I'm an avid supporter of having bananas on boats, but I've sailed with a few Kiwi sailors that are dead against it. They even see a banana lolly, they want them off the boat. So there's still a lot of superstitions that go around yachting.
Do you have any superstitions, Olivia?
I will not have green on board my boat.
Yeah.
As Sean mentioned, I do love to have some bananas on board. A couple of people don't like that. Other than that, I think I'm pretty normal, but I guess that's out there for the jury to decide.
That's it. Well, no green on the boat. Definitely an opportunity for some anti-foul on that boat. That'll prevent any algae build-up. Just chasing Cyrene 3 here again. They'd be comfortable with their position. They're kind of up batting with the Smuggler, for example. They'd be quite happy with that position.
Yeah, they'd be really happy. They've just come out of the refit as well, and we thought those stripes were pretty retro when we painted them on it. No, there was a lot of masking and some nervous painters when they took the tape off. But no, I think she looks pretty swish, and they'd be really happy with their position. They are definitely punching above their weight at the moment and looking very comfortable. We don't really see much wet weather gear. We're seeing a few legs out and some very brave souls. I think by 2 a.m. they'll be pretty well rugged up in their bear suits for sure.
If you're heading out in their sort of position, is it literally just direct out to sea, or would you be, just pointing as high as you possibly can, basically?
Well, it is an upwind. This is an upwind forecast, so you'd be going for what we call VMG, rather than VMC. Like the Sydney Hobart yacht race, a lot different. It's you generally sail the boat as fast as you can, and you're going down current. This race you're up current. At the moment, the mark's directly upwind, so you're trying to keep the boat pointing as high as you can, for sure.
Just looking at the other boats around us, Reeve, they're steady in where they're going, and we've got Next Spot as well coming up, just starting to head out towards the heads, maybe just pointing a good bit higher than them. is Tribal Warrior 2. And you know, still some big boats here. You know, there's still some. Well, there's Espresso 40. You know, these are guys who probably just got stuck a little bit in those kind of not so forgiving pockets at the start of the race.
Yeah, I think what I'm excited about, we're just coming up to her now, is Southern Excellence, which is the Tribal Warrior. Out of 15 sailors on board this boat, we've got 10 Indigenous sailors, and you know, which I'm very excited about. It's wonderful to see. They've got a big commitment to do the Rolex Sydney Hobart race this year. It's great to see them lining up in the Land Rover Sydney to Southport yacht race. They worked very hard at competing in the Rolex Sydney Hobart race, and you know, they had to change boats in the last week before the race, and that made it really difficult for them. That made it very difficult for them, and you know, they actually sailed this boat as an exhibition in the last Rolex Sydney Hobart race, and they got to the other end, and you know, they're putting in the effort, they're turning up. I'm really proud of these guys.
Absolutely. And then just off to port here, we've got Helsel 3. That's a very nice looking boat, if I don't say so myself.
Yeah, Helsel 3s, you know, they've been around doing a lot of our racing for a long time. Paul Mara's been in charge of that operation. I remember some awesome photos from the Rolex Sydney Hobart yacht race from them. You know, I think they're really just having a good time. If you have a look at them, they're really relaxed, just enjoying the beautiful day on Sydney Harbour.
Robbie Fisher on the helm there at the moment. Robbie's very synonymous with the Helsel name, because Helsel actually stands for Helen and Sally. So the Fisher family have had a whole string of Helsels, and he sold the boat a while ago, as he said, and you know, he hails from Tasmania now, and he's probably now hailing from Tasmania. He's probably ready to get into his shorts too, Olivia.
Definitely. To windward of us, we've got Calibre, who is also Sydney 38. We were mentioning the Goat before, and they did have to crack sheets and come away. They're only a little bit ahead of Calibre at this stage, though. I think they lost out a little bit at the end of that cracking sheet stage and just got stuck behind North Head. Calibre's kind of creeping up towards them, and good on them. I think they're to windward of this bunch of boats. You know, Helsel 3, Southern Excellence, Tribal Warrior, Wax Lyrical's down there as well. I think they're actually in a good position to get out of the harbour and out offshore.
Yeah, Calibre's in a really nice position. She's set herself up really well. We've got a bit of a crossing situation with a boat, and who won't be too happy with me sitting here, Warwick. Probably be a bit of occasional coarse language coming off that boat in a second.
Aptly named.
Oh, bit wet there. Yeah, it's a little bit splashy as we're heading, you know, getting pretty close to almost being out into the open water. There's definitely a fair amount of breeze out here. That boat's heeling over quite well, comfortably, but you know, there's certainly some bigger gusts as we get a bit further out.
So occasional Snowdome, occasional coarse language 2's just tacked on Calibre's hip here, just to windward. I think they'll be able to kind of claw back a little bit from, they were stuck down to leeward, and that's why they had to tack. So they'll be able to claw back a little bit once they get past North Head and everything opens up. The game becomes fully wide open,
yeah,
and they are catching up to this little bunch, so I really don't think they lost much out of that tack. It's a smart move for them to come up to windward and just get the best they can out of this breeze.
Yeah, it's really interesting sailing around North Head. You know, you'd think that headland would block all the wind out, but the wind actually spills over the top, comes down and accelerates. You can see these guys now really pressured up. You know, big wazzers moving up the rail. I'm happy to see that. There's a little left-hand shift closer to the shore. So earlier on, Olivia mentioned about the Goat having to crack sheets. They let their sails off and reached over the fleet, while the boats to leeward was still hard on the wind. So still fairly big, decent ships out here until things settle down.
And that north head, I think another thing that kind of happens out here is the funneling of the breeze. It just grabs onto north head, and you can see, you know, Warwick Sherman on occasional course language too, is more pressured up than the boats to leeward. So that's just, as Sean was explaining, it does some funny things out here, and they're definitely taking advantage of that.
Absolutely.
To leeward down below, we've got Black Sheep, and they've been a solid performer in last year's spring, summer, autumn point score series. They're ones that are always competitive. It's owned by Derek and Martin Shepherd, and they'll be pretty keen to have a red hot go at this.
Yeah, the Shepherd brothers, they compete in the Blue Water point score every opportunity they can to get to sea. They've got a great following. I've actually seen them finish a Rolex Sydney Hobart race stood at the end of the pier with all their followers, and you have to bar them in. So there's all these choruses of bars when they come in, which is a little unusual, but goes with the name. And yeah, they're a great competing family. Sailing a Beneteau 45, which is reasonably luxurious down below. They keep the boat in great nick and incredibly competitive and put in the time. Now, those guys won't be necessarily that happy with how they've got out their heads, but again, being such a good crew, they'll settle in and they'll just be loving it that they now can start to pass some boats.
It does look like a comfortable boat to sail though, Sean. I don't think that I'd be opposed to going on board it.
No, she's a little more comfortable than Maluka, I must say. They probably got hot showers to windward on that one, I'd say.
That's my type of yacht, I think.
The perfect balance.
And then to leeward, we've got Great Expectations. We haven't seen that much of them, but they're racing in the IRC and ORCI division, so who knows what they're going to do here. They look comfortable. Everyone's rugged up. They've got wet weather pants on. They're really one of the only yachts that we've seen ready for this.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty much ready for anything. They are a little bit further right than the rest of the fleet, but now enjoying reasonable breeze. You see their mainsail is very powered up. A few creases there that they'll probably pull the Cunningham eye on shortly and flatten that out. Just starting to settle into their stride. I'd say the helmsman's probably going to call them to move outboard a little bit more soon because he's getting pretty pressured up. I think things are happening because we're getting wet.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I was just about to mention the breeze is up to 12, 13 knots out here. It's beautiful. It really will be a nice cruise or race up the harbour. Sorry, up the coast, I should say, not cruise. But it looks like everyone's spreading out up here and trying to find the best kind of settle-in position for each other.
Yeah, so we've got more Witchcraft over here to our left, and more Witchcraft is owned by a past Commodore of the Cruising Yacht Club, and again done a lot of sailing, a lot of miles. John Cameron's had her for a while. Again, won't be really excited about where they are at the moment, but just happy that they're going to start moving through the fleet.
Definitely. They came second on PHS last year, so I think they'd be wanting to do one better and take it out this time.
Yeah. Guy's just come up from down below munching on something, so I think he's cooking lunch.
It's definitely lunchtime.
Yeah, it could be a banana. If he has a few more, he'll be doing better.
We just look, we've probably got, I don't know, what would we say, maybe another 10 boats behind us who are still just kind of squeezing out the heads. Will there be a lot of frustration with their position, do you think? Do you think they'll be a bit upset that it's not gone to plan?
Look, I think, as we've said continuously today, you've just got to stick to your game plan. Things will change for them. I've left Sydney Harbour last on numerous occasions on very small boats, and you'll pick somebody to catch, and you'll start working towards that. And it's about just improving your position as time goes on, and the all-important skeds, just to hear how your position is And the first morning, we've got to get through a fairly tough night tonight, and there's a good chance that these smaller boats will start to close up that distance.
Definitely. So we've just had Allegro, Oz Rio, She's the Culprit, Bare Necessity. They're all coming out in a bunch together. So I think there's a vast range of sizes between those 4 boats that I just mentioned. So I think we may see a couple of changes as they go up the coast. I'm definitely going to be watching the tracker to see how it all goes.
That's right, yep. The rest of the race, of course, well, we won't be, unfortunately, following the boats all the way up the coast. The yacht tracker at goldcoast.cyca.com will allow you to do just that, which will follow the boats. And, of course, we'll have our social media channels following as much action as we can get off the boats. Should be a bit of spare time in between the days on the way up to Southport, which will allow hopefully some of the crews to get some information, some pictures, some little stories and anecdotes about what's been happening on board.
We're coming up to one of the favoured boats, the little blue one up here, and the smallest boats in the fleet.
Just in front of them, this is Painkiller OP, and they are from the Gold Coast. So they've brought their boat down earlier in the week, and now they're racing it back.
Fairly good graphics on the bow there.
That'll be the boat builder in you, Sean. Is that something that you regularly look for and aspire to some nice graphics?
Yeah. Well, on the Grundig we had a big shark mouth on the bow, and then we had a few issues with whales not wanting to say hello to us, which was probably a good thing.
Yeah, you'd see some of the boats, the whale watching boats. Realistically, are whales a consideration for anyone heading up?
Look, whales are a huge consideration, especially for the much quicker boats. And we're seeing more and more and more whales, which is fantastic. But they are something that you really want to avoid. And we've never really worried about them so much on Maluka, but we certainly would worry about them on something like our very fast trimaran.
Yeah. So as we said, Komatsu Azuro here, a very attractive little boat. How many people will be on board there? What's the ideal crewing for that boat?
Well, the minimum number that you're allowed to crew with is 6, and I'd say that Shane will be sailing more than likely with 6. Olivia can tell me for sure, but
yeah, he is.
But 6 is a good number on a small boat like this, and the people still have to take water for that number of people and the safety gear as well. So you're at a slight disadvantage on a smaller boat with all the extra people, all the extra weight you have to carry. So it's really important that you get the people on the rail and keep chipping away. As you said, she's a beautiful Sparkman and Stevens design. I believe that Shane found it in a paddock somewhere and did her up. He's done an incredible job with her. He's been a bit of our sparring partner in the Rolex Sydney Hobart Yacht Race in Division 4, and I'm sure we'll be hitting out again soon.
Definitely. So last year he came first in Division 4 for the Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race, and he has actually won it in 2015 and then almost won it again in 2016, but the light breeze that came in just after everyone, most of the boats bar him finished, it just got snatched away from him.
So if we're looking at Komatsu Azuro here, we've got Maverick down to our right. And then would we say that is potentially the back of the fleet?
Not just yet, Ross. We do have Army Sailing Club Gunrunner. Yes. So they will be a little bit further back. There's 6 of them on board there, headed by Maurice Young. So they're all part of the Army Sailing Club. But for the moment, we're back on Maverick. So these guys are from Melbourne, and this is one of their first major yacht races. They're in training for the Melbourne to Osaka race in 2018, and this is just a nice training exercise for him. Rod Smallman is sailing with his son Tyson, and a couple of others on board. So I think it's just, they're really excited to just be racing against other boats.
Yeah, well that's the thing, setting themselves up for the Osaka race. It's a two-handed race, so this is just an equipment check. The Osaka race is from Melbourne to Osaka, two-handed race, quite a grueling, tough race, and as much shakedown as you can possibly do is going to be helpful for these guys. Very tidy looking little ship, this one. Well appointed, well put together, and I'm sure they're going to be doing lots of miles in the next 12 months, getting themselves match fit for that race.
That's using the race as an opportunity to prepare, and obviously the Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race is the first race within the Blue Water Point Score Series run by the CYCA. This being race 1, and race number 6 is of course the Rolex Sydney Hobart. So Sean, how much, if anything, I know it's obviously a fair distance away and different conditions, different time of year, is there anything that we can take from what we'll see over the next few days from these boats in Hobart, in the Hobart race in a couple of months?
Oh, look, no doubt, you know, the focus generally is on the big boats, and you know, what we're seeing at the front of the fleet with Wild Oats and Blackjack, they'll be doing whatever they need to do to get their boats match fit for that race. So this is a good hit out. For all the smaller boats, like we just mentioned, Azuro, he'll be taking away any advantages in rating that other boats may have picked up. We don't race against that boat with Maluka until the Hobart race, so he'll be sort of wondering what we're up to. There's a lot of cat and mouse that goes on with that. You know, all these races lead up to what a lot of people see as the ultimate prize, being the Rolex Sydney Hobart. Got to go to that army.
We'll just come back in and see if we can find our friend's gun runner, who yeah, this is them back here. They look like they've got some nice breeze. It's quite a small boat, isn't it, gun runner? Will it be one of the smaller boats in the fleet?
Yeah, gun runner is just a jacket 30-footer.
Yeah.
The Army Sailing Club purchased her way back in the 80s as a sail training boat, and just to do this race, to get to Cat 2, to get to qualify for this race, they had to put more lead into the build, and you know, done a lot of work to get to that level, and it's great that they've made the start line, and I'm sure they're going to enjoy far more racing with this boat.
Yeah. Well, he's going to check out to see who we've got ahead of us.
We do have a fair bit of a gap here, don't we? So, you know, majority of the fleet has left the harbour. We are outside the heads now, but we're just moving our way back in, just to finish up our broadcast and just show the rest of the fleet leaving the harbour. There still is about 13 to 14 knots. Sorry, pardon me, I'm just getting a bit wet here, Sean.
Yeah, sorry about that. I know that wasn't part of the brief.
I made sure that we discussed
early
this.
conversations.
We did talk about Olivia not liking water, and I said, well, you know, at the end of the day, if you're going to even come and sail skiffs, you're going to have to get used to it.
And I am, and thank you for this reminder.
Just trying to see the sail number of that boat that we've got up ahead of us.
So 4924, so this is she. So she, unfortunately, last night had a last-minute crew, I guess, pull out. So he's actually with 5 people on board. So owner and skipper is Philip Bell. So I know we said that the minimum was 6, but he's actually now in the cruising division, which you are allowed to sail with 5 people on board. So unfortunately for him, he isn't in the major divisions that we have been discussing, but he is in his own division, and so I guess that
stands a
means
good
he
chance.
wins.
Absolutely, stands a very good chance.
I think it's a great thing that the sailing committee of the Cruising Yacht Club allowed the boat to enter in the cruising division fairly late in the game, and given that participation is what we all wish to see in the sport, and you know, it's fantastic that they could get on board the Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race. So now we're coming up to the last boat out the heads, which is the boat we talked about earlier, the Gun Runner, with the Army Sailing Club team on board. Again, they'll be just happy that they're moving along now. You know, these guys possibly will be out long enough to pick up the southerly that we're talking about on Tuesday, and You know, again, at the moment we've got 5 guys on deck, so there's somebody probably down below getting tea ready.
They're just giving you guys a wave too. They're really excited to be racing with everyone. So
I love seeing the signage on the boat, the Army Gap Year.
Yeah, and one thing that they are here for is to promote the sport of sailing in the Army, and also the Army values, and they are courage, initiative, respect and teamwork. You can see on their jib they've actually got teamwork written up the front. That's one of their core values in the Army, and especially it makes sense here for sailing.
Yeah, look, it's absolutely fantastic to see the Army out here. Hopefully we'll get the Navy out here sometime, and then maybe even an Air Force team, so they can have a proper duel. But yeah, again, I'm proud of these guys that do a lot of work to this boat to get to the start line, and it's great to see them clearing the heads and heading north.
I think just finally, just to pick up on that point, you know, about the creation of that cruising division for the boat that has a crew of 5. It shows the kind of strict regulations, the rules that are essential with these offshore races. You know, this isn't just a small race. This isn't just a couple of days in some coastal waters. This is ocean racing, and with that comes a lot of risk, and there's a need to be prepared.
Well, if you consider this as a Cat 2 event, and the Fastnet race that's happening in a few weeks' time is a Cat 2 event. So this is the same level of safety, what you have to have for the Fastnet race. So yeah, it is a serious ocean race, even though it is sailing up a vast length of coast. It's of a decent length, and you know, you can get adverse weather. Best time of year to sail, but you can get adverse weather. So you know, this boat, Gun Runner, that we were talking about earlier, had to get more stability. It was built a long time ago, but it failed the Cat 2's stability test, so it had to have extra lead fitted into the bilge, which Andy DeVell came up with, and I put in a plug. The Noakes Boatyard fitted it a couple of weeks ago so they could make the start line.
Well, just before we wrap up, Sean, that start potentially there ended up being a bit of breeze finally in that sort of Middle Harbour area, which allowed us to see some of these boats in action, which you know, might not have been quite the really light start that we expected.
Yeah, look, it was interesting. I think both if Olivia and I are on the same boat, we pretty much would have started the same place, midline, looking for that pressure that was coming down the harbour, where I think the Wild Oats guys, they sniffed out that little sou'easter, started with a fair bit of pressure on starboard tack, were able to be patient and do their roll jibe where they use a canning keel to make the sails and all the battens flop across, furled and just waited for that next line of breeze to come through. They weren't worried about what Blackjack was doing. They got that pressure and they were out of there.
Olivia, was it a bit more of an exciting start? You know, you said interesting a number of times. Do you feel that you got it?
Yeah, definitely. You know, there was some uncertainty at the very start, but hey, I picked it. I think my shift was the one that dominated in the end, and it was cool to watch everyone adjust to it. Yes, it was in the forecast, but there was also that uncertainty to begin with. So I think the convergence zones, we had tacking, there was a bit of jostling for position, there was port starboards, there was wind with lures. What more could we really ask for?
Yeah, you know, the really cool thing, there was lots of different manoeuvres that were going on, but I didn't hear any shouting or screaming.
No.
It seemed unusually calm today on the water.
It was a calm day out here, and I think maybe the weather kind of helped us with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely brilliant. Fantastic. Well, with that, I think we'd bring our broadcast to a close, brought to you by Noakes Boat and Shipyards. Thank you for watching the start of the Land Rover Sydney Gold Coast Yacht Race. Our thanks to Sean Langman and to Olivia Price for their expert insights. Don't forget to follow the boats up the coast with the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia's Yacht Tracker. That's at goldcoast.cyca.com.au. We'll also be following the race on social media over the next few days. The CYCA's Facebook, Twitter and Instagram regularly updated. Thanks again to our race sponsor Land Rover and our broadcast sponsor Noakes Boat and Shipyard. And finally, thanks to everyone watching. A very good afternoon from Sydney Harbour.
this baby can do now.